The dust in the ancient Roman ruin of Lyra tasted of copper and forgotten time. Cale Orion, his back aching from a 10-hour shift excavating fragments of pottery, wiped a trail of sweat and grime from his forehead. It was past midnight. The air wasn't just cold, it hummed with a metallic, electric tension. He looked up. Above the crumbling arches, the moon hung like a cancerous organ. It was a blood moon, swollen and aggressively red, its light not soft and silver but a deep, bruised crimson that painted the limestone ruins in shades of dark wine and shadow. Stupid, he muttered to himself, grabbing his backpack. He'd ignored his team's warnings to leave before midnight. Local folklore claimed the Lyra site was cursed on the night of the red moon, that the fabric of reality was thin here. Cale, a man who dealt only in provable history, had scoffed. He took 3 steps before a sound like shattered glass made him freeze. It was coming from the center of the ruin, the main ceremonial circle. He slowly drew his rusty trowel, his only weapon, and crept toward the sound. The sight that greeted him wasn't a hallucination. In the center of the decaying, moss-covered floor stood a woman. Her hair was a startling silver white against the red light, whipping around her shoulders as if caught in a private storm. She wore tight, dark leather, heavy with what looked like ritualistic armor, and her skin possessed a breathtaking, dangerous pallor. She was drawing a glowing circle on the ground with a piece of chalk that shimmered with cosmic dust. The circle wasn't geometric. It was a complex series of cogs, gears, and celestial symbols, exactly like the ones Cale had only ever seen in lost medieval texts about impossible clocks. "Who are you?" Cale's voice was a weak croak. The woman slowly turned. Her eyes were not human. They were a violent, luminous ruby red, and they fixed on Cale with a hunter's precision. A sliver of a smile, sharp and unnerving, curved her lips. "The one who has been waiting," she said, her voice a low, silken melody that seemed to bypass his ears and settle directly in his chest. She didn't move fast. She moved with an ancient, predatorial grace, covering the 30 feet between them in a single flowing glide. Before Cale could even process raising his trowel, she was impossibly close. The smell of cold earth, ozone, and something like ancient, dried roses enveloped him. Her cold hand cupped his cheek, tilting his head. Cale's protest died in his throat, his rational mind drowning in the deep, powerful current of her red gaze. He felt a sudden, profound recognition, as if he were looking into a mirror reflecting a life he hadn't yet lived. "Cale Orion," she breathed, tasting the name. The line runs true. A sickening jolt of fear ripped through him as he saw the 2 elongated, crystalline fangs drop, catching the blood-red light. "No, please," he managed. She didn't answer. She only leaned in, her silver hair brushing against his neck like silk, and her voice, a sudden, fierce whisper in his ear, "Do not fear the end, Cale. Fear the beginning." The bite was not painful at first. It was a deep, searing pressure, followed by a dizzying rush of pure, icy heat that spread through his veins, warring with his own blood. He felt himself go slack against the strong grip of her arm. Then the pain came. Not from the bite but from inside his head. It was a flood. A torrent of images, voices, and sensations that had no context. He saw our version of himself, older, standing on a shattered moon, weeping. Our clock tower exploding, the hands spinning backward. Serafina, centuries younger, burning at a stake, her eyes pleading for a release that never came. An endless, swirling vortex of stars and darkness, and a voice screaming his name across a galaxy. His eyes flew open, but they were no longer brown. They were an impossible, shifting gold, laced with the deep, starry colors of the cosmos. He pushed Serafina away with a desperate shove he didn't know he possessed. She stumbled back, a dark, primal satisfaction in her red eyes, a bead of Cale's blood glistening on her chin. Cale collapsed onto his knees, his hands flying to his neck. He wasn't weak, he was violently overwhelmed. The air around him shimmered, and the dust in the ancient ruin began to float in golden, glowing rings. He looked at Serafina again, but this time he saw 3 versions of her. The one standing before him, one dissolving into dust 5 feet away, and one laughing cruelly at him from a distant shadow. What did you do to me?" he gasped, his voice vibrating with a power that wasn't his own. The silver-haired woman, Serafina, stepped out of the ritual circle, the blood moonlight illuminating her. "I did not turn you into a creature of the night, Cale Orion," she said, her red eyes gleaming with a terrible triumph. "I merely woke up the creature you already were." She pointed to the sky, to the pulsing red orb above. "Under the red moon, the vampire blood did not kill you. It was merely the catalyst. Now you don't just see the present, seer. You see every path not taken, every moment that could be. You are no longer bound by time." She took a step toward him, the gold rings around his body intensifying. She bit me under the red moon, Kale whispered, the title of his own story echoing in the silence of the ruin. He clutched his head as another wave of impossible futures hit him. And now you see through time, Serafina finished, her expression suddenly complex, part desire, part chilling calculation. And that sight, my dearest Kale, is the only thing that can save me. The transition was a terrifying blur. One moment, Kale was kneeling on the cold, ancient stone of Lyra, the golden rings of nascent power shimmering violently around him. The next, the ground rushed away and he felt a dizzying pressure, like being dragged through a collapsing star. He landed hard on a floor that was smooth, cold obsidian. He gasped, the visions in his head receding just enough to let him focus. He was no longer under the blood moon. He was in a sanctuary carved out of the earth. The cavernous room was vast, circular, and silent. Massive columns of black polished stone rose to a domed ceiling where faint violet light pulsed, not from electricity, but from something inherent to the stone itself. Intricate astrological maps were etched into the walls, marking the paths of stars long extinct. This wasn't a lair, it was a tomb or perhaps an ultra-advanced observatory. "Wipe the dust off your knees, seer," Serafina's voice commanded. She was standing across the room, shedding the heavy leather armor. Underneath, she wore a simple black tunic that somehow made her look even more dangerous. She ran a silver-tipped finger along a glowing constellation etched into the wall. Where are we?" Kale managed, staggering to his feet. The space felt like it was pressing in on his newly awakened senses. "Deep beneath the surface, where the light of the sun, and the eyes of my enemies, cannot reach," Serafina replied without turning around. "This is one of the last sanctuaries of Vikos. And for now, it is your prison and your training ground." Kale felt a sudden surge of adrenaline mixed with pure confusion. "Training? You bit me. You pumped your venom into my system. I'm seeing 3 versions of every wall, and I just watched the Roman Empire collapse and fast forward. You think I need training?" Serafina finally turned, her red eyes narrowing to slits of focused light. "Your power is a raging, blind tempest, Kale. Untrained, it will shatter your mind before the next dawn. Your temporal sight is not merely seeing the past, it is the ability to perceive the multiverse. Every possibility, every what if." She advanced slowly. The bite of the Vikos line, especially under a celestial conjunction like the blood moon, doesn't always create a vampire. On a rare few, those with the dormant Orion bloodline, it acts as a temporal key. It unlocks the potential to become a seer. The cost, Kale, is your sanity. As she spoke, Kale's gaze drifted to the left. He saw a fleeting image, Kale standing exactly where he was, but his skin was peeling away like dry parchment, his eyes wide and vacant. It was a vision of madness. He flinched, physically shaking the image away. "How do I stop it?" "You don't stop it," Serafina said, standing close enough for him to feel the cold aura radiating off her. "You command it." She reached out, her hand hovering over the constellation-infused skin of his chest, exactly where the image in the thumbnail had shown the light coming from. "Look at me, Kale. Not at the thousands of alternate Serafinas behind me." Kale tried. He focused fiercely on the real Serafina, the sharp lines of her jaw, the terrifying beauty of her red eyes. But behind her he saw Serafina, weeping tears of blood, kneeling before a colossal, broken clock face. Serafina, laughing as she incinerated a field of medieval soldiers. Serafina, holding the hand of a human man who looked surprisingly like Kale, both smiling under a normal silver moon. "Tell me what you see," she urged, her voice low. I see you dying," Kale whispered, a shudder running through him. "And I see you loving someone. A human." A flicker of raw pain, not cruelty but deep, ancient sadness, crossed Serafina's face before it was masked by cold indifference. "Focus, seer. Focus on the now. The immediate moment. Stop looking into the river of time and find the single stone you are standing on." She placed her hands on his shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your power is tethered to your emotional state. Fear and chaos make the vision stronger. You must find the anchor within yourself. The central, unmoving point of Kale Orion." She leaned in, her eyes boring into his. "If you cannot control the sight, I will have to blind you. And you will be useless to me." "Useless for what?" Kale demanded. He was fighting the visions, focusing all his willpower on her face. The golden glow around his eyes intensified, and for the first time, the background multiplicity of Serafina dimmed. "You are the anchor, Kale. The temporal anchor. My curse is bound to the cycle of the red moon, a cycle controlled by a long-dead sorcerer. The only way to break the binding is to use a pure seer to navigate the temporal flow and find the exact moment the curse was placed." She paused, letting the weight of the revelation settle. You will see through time, Kale. You will walk through the streams of history, and you will find the one moment I need to change. I need you to look back and break the link that keeps me a slave. Kale looked at her, the single, present Serafina. He could still see the pain of centuries in her eyes, but he also saw the relentless, pragmatic drive of a predator. He hated her for what she'd done, but the images of her suffering confused his hatred. And if I refuse? He challenged, his voice steadying. Serafina smiled, a chilling promise in her eyes. Then I will have you destroyed, Kale. But first I will watch your mind unravel into a million possibilities. And that, she stepped back, gesturing to the sprawling, silent sanctuary, will take a very long time. She turned and moved toward a smaller side arch, rest. The blood moon is setting, and with it the chaos will subside slightly. Tomorrow the lessons begin. Try not to see your own demise before then. Kale watched her walk away, his golden eyes blazing in the dim light. He felt the vast, cold emptiness of the sanctuary, but for the first time, the cacophony in his mind had lessened. He had a focus point, Serafina's curse. And a terrifying goal, to control the power that was trying to rip his reality apart. Kale woke up to silence so profound it felt like a scream. He was on a narrow, uncomfortable slab of obsidian that served as a bed. His neck ached where Serafina's fangs had pierced him, but the injury itself was surprisingly clean. He still felt the cold, creeping sensation of her venom in his veins, a constant, low thrum beneath his skin. More pressingly, the silence in his mind was a lie. He tried to focus on the ceiling but instead saw 3 flickering images overlaid on the stone. The past, a Neanderthal painting on the rock. The present, the smooth, polished obsidian. And the future, the ceiling cracking into a million pieces. The sight was exhausting. He sat up just as a dark figure entered the chamber. It wasn't Serafina. It was a man, tall and powerfully built, wearing functional black armor that looked more ceremonial than practical. His face was sharp, etched with deep suspicion, and his eyes were flat, hard gray. This was Marcus, Serafina's second-in-command. The mistress awaits. Marcus's voice was a low growl, devoid of warmth. He didn't look at Kale as a partner but as a dangerous parasite. And she is not known for her patience with mortals. Mortals? Kale scoffed, getting to his feet, the cosmic energy flickering faintly around his eyes. Tell your mistress I'm not exactly mortal anymore, thanks to her. Marcus finally met his gaze, and a flicker of something ancient and deadly crossed his features. You are an anomaly, Orion. Nothing more. Do not forget your place. He gestured sharply towards a far tunnel. Move. Marcus led Kale through winding, lightless tunnels until they opened into a colossal training room. It was bare stone, save for a single ornate, golden pendulum swinging slowly from the high ceiling, its rhythmic clack-clack echoing in the vast space. Serafina was waiting. She had changed into a high-collared, blood-red coat, her silver hair pulled back severely. She looked like a general preparing for war. Kale. Good, you're functional, she said, her red eyes immediately fixing on the golden shimmer in his own. Your first lesson is the most crucial, filtering. Filtering what? The 4 timelines where Marcus murders me in my sleep. Kale challenged. Marcus took an aggressive step forward, but Serafina stopped him with a single, icy look. You see infinite threads of time because your mind is treating it all as equal data, she explained, pacing slowly. When you look at that pendulum, what do you see? Kale focused on the golden weight swinging back and forth. I see it now, he started, concentrating hard. But I also see it before it was cast in the mold, and I see it after it crashes to the floor, rusted and broken. 3 realities overlapping. Serafina smiled, a dangerous, encouraging expression. Excellent. Now choose one. What? Choose one. Force your focus. Use the memory of pain, use your rage at me, use whatever anchor you can find. Block out the possibilities. This room, this moment, is the only reality that matters right now. Kale closed his eyes, clenching his fists. The visions intensified. The room exploded into a kaleidoscope of potential events. He saw Serafina dying in a dozen gruesome ways. He saw himself growing old peacefully. He saw the sanctuary flooding with purple alien light. It was too much. He wanted to scream. You are losing it. Serafina shouted, her voice cutting through the noise in his head. Find the center, Kale. Find the unmoving point. Suddenly, Kale focused on the memory of her fangs sinking into his neck. The icy heat, the betrayal, the horrifying clarity of that instant. It was a fixed point. A definite, unchangeable action. He channeled his burning hatred for what she had done. He opened his eyes. The room snapped into focus. The pendulum was swinging just once. The past and future versions were gone. His eyes, though still glowing gold, were steady. I see it, he breathed, a dizzying sense of control washing over him. You chose the present, Serafina confirmed, walking up to him, a genuine look of awe in her eyes. Few can filter so quickly. Your Orion blood is potent. She was so close he could smell the faint scent of copper on her armor. Why me? Kale asked, his voice rough. Why not find another seer? Serafina's expression hardened. The Orion bloodline is almost extinct. You're the last. And my curse is growing stronger, Kale. The blood-moon cycle is compressing. I'm running out of time. She reached out and traced the golden light around his eye. You are not just my tool, Kale. You are my only hope. Suddenly, the polished obsidian floor beneath them vibrated. Not an earthquake, but a targeted, magical resonance. The golden pendulum stopped mid-swing. Marcus snapped to attention, drawing a wickedly curved sword made of polished black iron. Mistress, the outer wards. They are breaching. Serafina's red eyes flashed with cold fury. The Watchers. They found us faster than I anticipated. The Watchers. Kale repeated. The ancient society I told you about, Serafina hissed, grabbing his arm with surprising force. The ones who protect the true flow of time. They see your new power as a deadly virus. They don't want me, Kale. They want to prune you. They want to erase your entire existence because you now see too much. A sound like distant, shattering clockwork echoed through the tunnels. A burst of deep blue, chilling energy erupted at the far end of the training room. 3 figures in heavy, metallic gray cloaks stood framed in the opening. The seer must be terminated, one of them boomed, their voice artificially distorted and layered with a high-pitched metallic whine. Serafina shoved Kale behind the nearest stone column. This is not a drill, seer, she commanded, her face a mask of primal aggression. She pulled a long, jeweled dagger from her belt. Run. Use the exit tunnel behind the column. And if you value your future, do not get caught by the Watchers. They do not kill you, Kale. They delete you from existence. She gave him one last look, a sudden intensity in her red eyes. I will find you. Now go. The battle began with a terrifying crash of forces. Serafina, fast and lethal, clashed with the Watchers, her dagger meeting their pulsing blue energy shields. Kale didn't hesitate. He dashed for the tunnel, the last image in his mind the sight of Serafina, the predator, fighting fiercely not for her own freedom but for his life. Kale didn't run, he flew. The latent strength Serafina's venom had unlocked, coupled with sheer, blinding terror, propelled him through the narrow escape tunnel. Behind him, the sounds of battle, the hiss of vampiric speed, the metallic clash of Marcus's sword, and the high-pitched chronal energy bursts of the Watchers, were getting muffled but remaining dangerously close. The tunnel spat him out onto a cracked, desolate street in the heart of an unfamiliar, run-down European city. Above him, the buildings were tall and dark, their architecture ancient but neglected. It was still the dead of night. He stopped, gasping for breath, the golden glow around his eyes flickering wildly. He had filtered the sight back to the present moment, but the sheer weight of possibility pressed down on him. Every neon sign, every parked car, every damp cobblestone seemed to whisper its own potential fate. Kale is crushed by a falling gargoyle in 3, 2, 1. He instinctively lunged sideways, just as a large, waterlogged piece of stone cornice detached from the building across the street and smashed onto the exact spot where he'd been standing. I have to control this, he panted, backing into the shadow of a boarded-up antique shop. He focused on his anchor, the memory of Serafina's bite, to force the multiple timelines back. Present. Only the present. He needed a way out and he couldn't afford to run aimlessly. He focused his glowing eyes on the intersection ahead. Immediately, the vision fractured. Timeline A. He runs straight down the street, turns left, and is cornered by 2 Watchers in a dead end. Result, erased. Timeline B. He tries to steal a beat-up sedan. The alarm goes off, attracting the Watchers' attention. Result, captured. Timeline C. He takes a narrow alley to the right. The alley is clear, and it opens into a bustling night market, giving him cover. Result, escape. Kale chose Timeline C. Without hesitation, he darted right, ignoring a stray dog that barked furiously at the golden glow in his eyes. The alley was slick with refuse, but his amplified senses made him move with unnatural speed and precision. He vaulted over a dumpster and slid under a hanging laundry line, emerging into a whirlwind of noise, light, and smells. It was a thriving, illegal night market, tucked away from the main streets. He pulled his historian's hoodie up, trying to conceal the terrifying light in his eyes. He blended into the crowd, rushing past stalls selling questionable antique relics and steaming street food. Suddenly, a voice, low and dangerous, stopped him cold. "Turn around slowly, Orion." Cale spun, his heart hammering. It was Marcus. He was leaning against a stall piled high with glowing, exotic fruits, his black armor blending perfectly with the deep shadows. He looked completely unruffled, not a scratch on him. Serafina?" Cale stammered. "Is she all right? Did the Watchers—" "The mistress is handling her guests," Marcus interrupted, his gray eyes piercing. "She is a queen, she is not easily inconvenienced. But she sent me with a message and I will not repeat it." He stepped closer, his imposing height forcing Cale to look up. "You are an amateur with a god's power. Your temporal sight leaves a ripple in time. It's like dragging a stone through a still pool. The Watchers are tracking that ripple." "What do I do?" Cale asked desperately. "The mistress orders you to find the chronomancer's locket," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It is a temporal dampener. It will mask your signature from the Watchers. It's hidden here, somewhere in this city. She believes you are the only one who can see its location. You want me to find a mythical artifact in a random illegal market based on a vision?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. "Find it and then go to the coordinates I will give you. Do not fail. If the Watchers erase you, the mistress will have lost her temporal key. And I," he leaned in, his breath cold, "will hunt you across every lifetime that remains." Marcus pressed a small, intricately carved obsidian shard into Cale's palm. "The coordinates are magically encoded here. When you find the locket, go there." Just as quickly as he appeared, Marcus melted back into the shadows of the market, disappearing as effortlessly as a smoke wraith. Cale was alone, holding the cold shard and feeling the terrifying pull of the Watchers getting closer. He had no choice. He needed the dampener. He focused his gaze on the swirling crowd, letting his power flow, but maintaining his filter. He wasn't looking for a future path now. He was looking for a past impression, the energy signature of an artifact. He scanned the antique stalls, his golden eyes blazing under the dim streetlights. Then he stopped. At the very end of the market, under a flickering, broken streetlight, stood a stall selling seemingly random junk, tarnished silver, broken plates, and old books. Cale's mind screamed with a flash of light. He saw a 16th-century Italian man burying a small silver object under the floorboards of a tailor shop. The tailor shop's wooden sign decaying, replaced by the modern street number. The faint, pulsing, blue-white energy radiating from a small metal box. The timeline snapped back to the present. The stall was there and the junk seller was asleep, his head resting on the counter. Cale walked quickly toward the stall. His gaze went straight to a tarnished, unremarkable silver music box on the top shelf. It was dusty and looked worthless. "Is that it?" He reached out. As his fingers brushed the cold metal, a powerful protective jolt of temporal energy shot up his arm. It was the locket's protective field, disguised as a music box. He snatched the box, feeling its strange, comforting weight. The golden light in his eyes dimmed, not gone but contained, shielded. He felt the mental pressure ease, like a screaming cacophony had been replaced by a low hum. The chronomancer's locket was his. Cale looked up at the broken streetlight above the stall. As if reacting to the sudden shift in his temporal signature, the light sputtered one last time, glowed a dangerous blue, and then shattered, plunging the stall into sudden, absolute darkness. He had the key. Now he had to find the lock. He stared at the obsidian shard in his hand, feeling the complex magic coursing through it, and turned to face the vast, unknown city. The chronomancer's locket, disguised inside the music box, was a miracle. With it held tight against his chest, the constant, maddening roar of infinite possibilities had been muted to a manageable whisper. Cale could still perceive potential futures, but they were distant echoes, not blinding floods. He followed the faint, magical pulse emanating from Marcus's obsidian shard. It led him out of the chaotic night market and into the older, aristocratic quarter of the city, a place of silent embassies and soaring, Gothic architecture. The shard's pulse grew stronger as he approached a towering black structure, the city's main clock tower. It was a terrifyingly appropriate location. Cale used his historian's knowledge to find a hidden maintenance entrance. His enhanced strength and agility, gifts of the vampire venom, allowed him to scale the crumbling interior scaffolding easily. Higher and higher he climbed, the mechanical thrum of the massive clock gears growing louder. He could hear every tick, every grind, every minute alteration in the timekeeping mechanism. The sound was deafening yet strangely calming, a perfect counterpoint to the chaos of his new powers. He reached the main belfry level, a circular room where the huge, bronze clock face mechanisms dominated the space. The air here was thick with oil, dust, and the metallic tang of something old and powerful. And then he saw her. Serafina stood by a colossal 10-foot-tall gear assembly, silhouetted against the muted glow of the streetlights filtering through the clock face. Her silver hair was slightly disheveled, her dark armor bore faint scratches, and there was a barely visible smear of blood, not her own, on her cheek. She looked tired, dangerous, and overwhelmingly beautiful. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. "You're late, Seer," she said without turning, her voice a low vibration that resonated with the massive bronze gears. "A 3-minute delay. A lifetime in my world." "The Watchers were faster than you expected," Cale countered, walking into the room. He gripped the music box tighter. "And I had to stop and pick up your magical trinket." He tossed the obsidian shard onto a workbench. "I got the locket. Did you get rid of your guests?" Serafina finally turned, her red eyes sweeping over him, lingering on the place where he held the locket. "The Watchers were merely a distraction," she stated coolly. "They left a clear message. Stop tampering with the flow of time or be unmade. They will be back, Cale. And next time they won't send a warning." She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. "Show me the locket." Cale hesitated, then opened the music box and lifted the tarnished silver pendant. As it left the box, the temporal dampening field seemed to intensify. Serafina reached out, her long fingers brushing the surface of the locket, then trailing down his arm. She didn't take it. Instead, her hand rested against his chest, right over his frantically beating heart. "You are surprisingly resilient, Cale Orion," she whispered, her eyes softening slightly. "When I saw the possibilities of your death at the hands of the Watchers, I nearly went against my own plan. You are difficult to replace." "Is that all I am? Difficult to replace?" Cale challenged, fueled by a mixture of anger and the strange raw attraction that pulsed between them. "I'm a tool for your personal freedom. A magical key." "Initially? Yes," Serafina admitted, taking an agonizingly small step closer. Her breath was cool against his ear. "But the bite links us, Cale. Not just physically. When you look into time, you don't just see history, you feel the echoes of my memories." She took his face in her hands, her cold touch igniting a fire in his skin. "Do you know what it is to live 5 centuries, Cale? To watch everything you love turn to dust? The curse binds me to the red moon cycle, yes, but it also forces me to relive the moment of my greatest failure every time the cycle peaks." Her voice cracked with genuine, profound pain. "I need you to break the temporal thread that binds that memory, Cale. Not just for my freedom, but so I can finally have peace." Before Cale could process the sincerity in her voice, or the vulnerable humanity in her red eyes, she closed the remaining distance. She didn't bite him this time, she simply kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was a centuries-old hunger, fierce and demanding. Her lips were cold, but the kiss sent a burning, electric shock through Cale, overpowering his rational mind. In that instant of contact, Cale's temporal vision exploded, not with endless possibilities, but with a single, clear, devastating memory. He saw Serafina, not as a queen, but a frightened human woman named Elara, standing over the body of a man. The man was a chronomancer, dying in her arms, placing a dark, binding curse on her just as the red light of the moon touched them both. His name flashed in Cale's mind, Lucian. Elara's face contorted in agony as the curse took hold, turning her skin pale and her eyes red. The vision vanished as Serafina broke the kiss, stepping back sharply, her own eyes wide with a mixture of desire and self-reproach. Cale was breathing heavily, his golden eyes blazing. He felt utterly consumed, his hatred momentarily drowned out by the shared sorrow of her past. "You are Elara," he stated, his voice trembling. "And he cursed you because you loved him. That is what you saw?" Serafina whispered, her defensive walls crumbling. "Then you truly are the seer. The anchor." She quickly regained her composure, her face hardening. "The curse is tied to a powerful hidden artifact called the Ethereum Clock. I believe the chronomancer Lucian hid it in the heart of the most sacred place he could imagine, the Library of Alexandria." She pointed to a weathered map spread out on a nearby table, showing a coastline far from their current location. "Our current location is compromised. We leave at dawn. Cale, you will use the locket to navigate the most secure route through the Watcher's temporal network, and you will use your sight to find the Ethereum Clock." She looked at him, the dark promise in her eyes now mixed with the memory of the kiss. "You have seen my truth. Now you must help me rewrite it." The journey began not with a grand escape, but with a calculated, silent retreat. Serafina had secured a discreet, armored cargo transport, a relic of the Cold War era, that could navigate borders without attracting the kind of attention a vampire queen and a newly awakened temporal seer usually would. They traveled for 3 days, heading southeast toward the Mediterranean. The confines of the transport's cramped cabin became a crucible for their volatile relationship. The chronomancer's locket worked flawlessly. Kale, holding it, sat hunched over Seraphina's ancient maps, his golden eyes scanning the land ahead. He wasn't just looking at geography, he was seeing the temporal ley lines, invisible currents of time energy that snaked across the planet. "We cannot take the direct route," Kale said, tracing a finger across the map where the border of a mountainous region lay. "In Timeline Gamma 7, the Watchers have established a nexus there. They're using a low-frequency temporal distortion to monitor all magical signatures." "A nexus," Seraphina repeated, leaning in close. She was dressed in practical, dark travel clothes, her silver hair tied back. The proximity was a constant distraction to Kale. "How do we bypass it?" "We deviate north," Kale replied, pointing to a desolate, desert path. "The ley lines here are chaotic, almost dead. The Watchers won't waste energy monitoring a place where time itself is thin and confused." Seraphina studied his face, her red eyes intense. "You are learning fast, Kale. You are seeing the currents, not just the eddies." "You learn fast when the alternative is being pruned from existence," Kale muttered, pulling the locket's chain out from under his shirt. The locket was warm against his skin, a comforting anchor. "Your sight is not only a weapon against them," Seraphina said, her voice dropping, "it is a mirror of my past. You saw Lucian." Kale met her gaze. "I saw Ilara, a woman who loved a powerful, dangerous man. And I saw the pain of his betrayal when he cursed you." "Lucian was not merely a chronomancer," Seraphina said, her voice laced with bitterness. "He was the arch-chronomancer. He protected the Ethereum clock, a device that doesn't just keep time, Kale, it dictates it. When I refused to give up my power to him, he bound me using the clock's energy and the blood moon's alignment. He didn't just curse me, he turned me into a creature of eternal suffering, doomed to relive my guilt." She reached out, her fingers just shy of touching his cheek. "The price of my freedom is finding and destroying that clock. If you can help me rewind that one final moment, Lucian's betrayal, the curse unravels." Kale felt a powerful surge of conflicting emotions, empathy for her centuries of suffering, and suspicion about her true, ultimate power if she were truly free. As they veered onto the desert road Kale had selected, the transport was hit with a crushing force. The heavy armor groaned and Kale was thrown against the wall. "What was that?" Kale yelled, scrambling for the locket. Seraphina was instantly alert, her predatory instincts taking over. "Not the Watchers. Their attacks are silent, precise. This is Marcus." "Marcus? But he's your second." Seraphina's face was grim. "He is Vico's clan. He is loyal to the line, Kale, not necessarily to me. He sees you as a dangerous anomaly who is corrupting my judgment. He must have used the detour to set a trap." The back door of the transport was ripped open with a screech of tearing metal. Marcus stood framed in the opening, a heavy, dust-covered figure of righteous fury, his black iron sword gleaming. "Mistress." Marcus's voice boomed. "I refuse to let this temporal stain lead you to the brink of ruin. His power is too volatile. I will deliver the locket to you, and I will erase the seer myself." He lunged toward Kale. Seraphina moved like a blur, intercepting Marcus with a speed that defied physics. The siblings clashed, their movements a brutal ballet of ancient vampire power. Marcus was immensely strong, but Seraphina was driven by desperation. Kale knew he had to act. His golden eyes focused, not on the fighters but on the shifting, desolate sand around them. He filtered his vision. How can I stop Marcus without harming Seraphina? Timeline Alpha. He intervenes directly, getting killed in the crossfire. Result, fail. Timeline Beta. He uses his new strength to push a nearby boulder. And misses Marcus. Result, distraction but failure. Timeline Delta. He sees a fault line in the temporal ley line a few feet from Marcus, a weak spot in the fabric of the immediate time. Kale focused all his energy into the temporal fault line. He didn't need to physically hit Marcus. He just needed to temporarily confuse his senses. He threw the obsidian shard Marcus had given him, aiming for the exact spot he perceived the fault line to be. As the shard struck the ground, Kale commanded his power, letting out a raw, unfiltered cry. The air around Marcus shimmered violently. For a second, Marcus seemed to flicker between 3 different locations, his sword arm blurring. The veteran fighter paused, his temporal equilibrium momentarily shattered by Kale's targeted blast. It was all the opening Seraphina needed. She delivered a lightning-fast kick that sent Marcus tumbling out of the truck and into the sand. Marcus, stand down. Seraphina commanded, her voice ringing with finality. The seer is under my protection. If you challenge him again, you challenge the Vicos line itself. Marcus slowly rose, dusting himself off, his eyes filled with hatred for Kale but unwavering loyalty to his queen. He vanished into the desert haze, defeated for now. Seraphina turned back to Kale, her chest heaving. She looked at his golden eyes, filled with the raw power of the fracture. You used your power to attack the time stream itself, she breathed, a strange mix of fear and admiration in her eyes. You are more dangerous than I thought, Kale. And I need you to be even more so. The coastal city of Alexandria was a jarring contrast to the desert and the dark sanctuary. Here the air was thick with salt and history, and the sunlight was a blinding, oppressive force that Seraphina had to endure, cloaked and veiled, relying entirely on Kale's temporal sight. They found their base in the labyrinthine underbelly of the modern city, the ruins of the ancient port, now partially submerged. Lucian, the chronomancer, was obsessed with preserving knowledge, Seraphina explained, leading Kale through a series of damp, echoing stone corridors near the waterline. He would never have left the Ethereum clock in a simple crypt. It would be in the heart of the greatest repository of time and knowledge, the original Great Library of Alexandria. But the library was destroyed centuries ago, Kale argued, his golden eyes scanning the ruins. The air here was heavy with 1,000 fading timelines. The building burned, Kale, Seraphina corrected, a bitter edge to her voice. But the vault of archives, the lowest, most sacred level, was said to be shielded, a temporal anchor point. Only a seer could find the exact location of its temporal signature. Kale activated the chronomancer's locket. The silver pendant thrummed, focusing the chaos. He pressed his hand against a cold, moss-covered wall. His vision snapped to the past. He saw not the flooded ruins but a bustling, torchlit corridor of marble, stacked high with priceless scrolls. He saw scholars in robes, feverishly copying texts. And then he saw Lucian, a powerful, scholarly man with eyes as cold and calculating as Marcus's, sealing a section of the wall with a complex, glowing temporal sigil. It's here, Kale whispered, his eyes blazing gold. Behind this wall. He used a temporal displacement lock. The real vault is locked in a past moment, out of sync with our present reality. How do we break a lock that exists in a different time? Seraphina asked, her voice low. We don't, Kale replied, stepping back. We use my sight to find the moment he activated the lock, and your vampiric strength to hit the exact spot where the energy was concentrated. We create a brief, focused temporal fracture, just enough to rip open the seam between the timelines. It was a risky, desperate plan. As they prepared, Kale felt the need to understand Seraphina's true goal. He turned to her. Elara, he used her human name deliberately. When the curse is broken, when you are free from the cycle, what will you be? Just an ancient, powerful vampire? Seraphina paused, adjusting the heavy silver brooch on her cloak. I will be free, Kale. Free to make my own choices, free from the agony of reliving Lucian's curse every blood moon. But the power, Kale pressed, stepping closer. If the Ethereum clock can dictate time, destroying it might not just break the curse. It might grant you control over the remaining timelines. The power you'd gain would be terrifying. The truth was a heavy, palpable thing between them. Seraphina moved toward him, her red eyes burning with an intense, raw emotion. My power is already terrifying, Kale. What I lack is the choice of how to use it. If I am truly free, I could choose to abandon the hunt. I could choose to live for something other than survival. She reached out and traced the sharp line of his jaw. You are the one who saw the three versions of me. You saw the cruel queen, but you also saw the woman who loved and lost. Your sight gives you the ability to choose which of those I become, Kale. You are the only person who has seen my soul unmasked. She looked genuinely torn, the ancient predator battling the cursed human woman. Now, she commanded, the tone shifting back to the queen, focus on the past. Find the sigil's activation point. Trust the woman who needs you to find her freedom. Kale took a deep breath, clutching the locket, and stared at the wall. His eyes flared, and the golden energy pulsed, mapping the faint energy residual of Lucian's ancient magic. Now, left side. 3 feet up. It's the highest concentration of residual energy. Now, Seraphina. Seraphina didn't hesitate. With a guttural cry, she slammed her armored fist into the precise spot Kale had designated. The blow was so forceful, the sound was muted, swallowed by a sudden, intense blue-white flash of temporal energy. The solid stone wall didn't crack. It shattered into a crystalline shower, revealing not another wall but a perfect, square doorway. Through the doorway, Kale saw a room untouched by time, a vast cylindrical vault lined with shelves of glowing intact scrolls. In the center, suspended by pulsing arcs of silver energy, was the objective. It was not a tower clock, but a massive, intricate golden sphere, crisscrossed with dozens of spinning temporal rings, humming with the essence of all recorded time. At its center, a crimson glow pulsed, the faint, powerful energy of the curse. There it is, Seraphina breathed, stepping into the vault, her red eyes fixed on the device. The engine of my suffering. But as Kale stepped through the gap, a low, distorted voice echoed from the far corner of the vault. You should have listened to my warnings, Vikos. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, cloaked watcher, but unlike the others, this one wore ceremonial silver armor. His voice was not mechanical but smooth, cold, and utterly authoritative. You cannot be here, Seraphina hissed, her body tensing. The watcher smiled, a cold, terrifying expression. This vault is an official temporal repository. We have been waiting. And we have brought your family, Elara. The watcher stepped aside, revealing two more figures in dark armor, holding a captive between them. The captive was none other than Marcus, his face bruised, his loyalty finally shattered by capture. And now, Seer, the lead watcher turned to Kale, you will see the one timeline you cannot escape. The air in the vault of archives was not of history, but of impending doom. The golden sphere of the Ethereum clock pulsed between the three central figures, Kale, the Seer, Seraphina, the Cursed Queen, and the leader of their antagonists, the Archwatcher. The Archwatcher was a towering figure whose silver armor seemed to absorb the light. His face, partially obscured by his cowl, was stern and scholarly, a chilling reflection of the chronomancer, Lucian. Welcome to the end of your time, Kale Orion, the Archwatcher said, his voice resonating with cold authority. And welcome back to the prison, Elara Vikos. Seraphina's eyes flashed with pure ancient hatred. Marcus, you betrayed me? The captive Marcus struggled against the two watchers holding him. His eyes were red with fury and shame. I did what was necessary for the Vikos line, mistress. He is too dangerous. The watchers promised they would neutralize the seer and then bind your curse to a manageable cycle, not destroy you. Silence, simpleton, the Archwatcher snapped, silencing Marcus with a wave of his hand. He turned his attention back to Seraphina. We have no interest in your destruction, Elara. Only your stability. Unbound, your power would shatter the timelines we swore to protect. The curse keeps you chained. The Ethereum clock keeps the curse stable. He pointed to the golden sphere. This clock is the heart of temporal flow. It has two functions, to record and to dictate. Lucian bound your soul to its energy. We, the Watchers, merely maintain the clock's balance. The Archwatcher then focused his gaze, cold and direct, on Kale. You, Seer, are the real threat. Your ability to see and manipulate multiple timelines is an infection. We should erase you. But we see a more elegant solution. He gestured dramatically toward the Ethereum clock. Look into the clock, Kale Orion. Use your full, unfiltered sight. Kale hesitated, but the compulsion was too strong. He let the chronomancer's locket drop slightly and channeled the pure chaos of his power into the golden sphere. The visions that erupted were overwhelming. Kale saw the true potential of the clock. He didn't just see the curse. He saw that the clock could be used to rewind specific moments in universal history. It could, theoretically, grant its wielder the power to become a god. He snapped his eyes shut, reeling from the raw magnitude of the sight. The bargain is simple, Seer, the Archwatcher stated. Use your power to stabilize the clock, solidifying Elara's current curse. In return, we will grant you two things. First, we will bind your temporal sight to the locket permanently, giving you perfect control and saving your mind. Second, we will offer you an escape route to a reality where Seraphina Vikos never existed. You will be free, safe, and sane. It was the ultimate temptation. Sanity, freedom, and the chance to escape the creature who had ruined his life. Seraphina stepped forward, her vulnerability replaced by the sheer force of her vampiric will. Don't listen to him, Kale. He lies. Stability means eternal bondage. He is offering you peace in exchange for making me his eternal slave. She grabbed Kale's hand, her touch freezing yet desperate. You saw the truth, Kale. You saw Elara. I didn't ask you for power. I asked you for freedom. If I'm free, I can choose a life with you, a shared destiny. Kale looked from the cold, rational logic of the Archwatcher to the desperate, passionate plea of Seraphina. He focused on his anchor, the memory of her fangs sinking in his neck, and used that fixed point to cut through the noise. He looked at Seraphina. He didn't see the cruel queen or the cursed victim. He saw the woman who fought for his life against Marcus. The woman who risked everything for the chance of peace. He had to take a leap of faith. Kale pushed Serafina behind him, his golden eyes burning with defiance. No deal, Kale said, his voice steady. I've seen the future you offer, Watcher. It's a sterile, empty timeline where nothing changes. You want stability? I want freedom. And she deserves hers. The Archwatcher sighed, his disappointment palpable. A pity? Then you will be pruned and she will remain bound. As the Watchers raised their energy weapons, Kale acted. He reached out and grabbed the Ethereum clock itself, ignoring the searing pain and the chaos rushing back into his mind. He didn't aim to destroy it, he aimed to fracture it. Temporal overload. Kale roared, pouring his nascent temporal power into the clock. The golden sphere began to scream, a high-pitched whine that fractured the air. The clock's mechanism started to spin backward and forward simultaneously. The entire room dissolved into a dizzying white flash of pure time energy. The Archwatcher screamed in a mixture of pain and outrage. The two Watchers holding Marcus exploded into dust as their temporal signature was ripped from their existence. Kale felt Serafina grab him, shielding him with her body as the wave hit. The last thing he heard was the terrifying sound of the Ethereum clock shattering into a million pieces. He woke up in darkness, the scent of dust and roses filling his lungs, the cold weight of Serafina Vikos pressed against him. Kale woke up slowly, the silence in his mind more terrifying than the previous chaos. He was no longer in the vault. They were in a dark, narrow alcove carved out of the subterranean stone. He was pinned under the heavy, cold weight of Serafina's body, her embrace tight and fiercely protective. Serafina. Kale pushed her gently, his heart pounding. Are you all right? What happened? Serafina slowly lifted her head. Her silver hair was dusted with fine metallic powder, the remnants of the shattered Ethereum clock. She sat up, her eyes wide, staring into the darkness. I shielded us, she whispered, her voice rough. When you broke the clock, the force of the temporal release would have erased us both. I absorbed the brunt of the shock. Kale looked at her, searching for injuries. Then he realized something profound had changed. Her red eyes, the terrifying mark of her curse in the Vikos line, were no longer a violent ruby. They were a deep, complex burgundy, almost black, and they held an unsettling stillness. The curse, Serafina breathed, touching her own eye as if confirming the change. She didn't look triumphant, but fearful. It's gone. The binding is broken. Kale felt a dizzying wave of realization. He focused his own golden eyes, now clear and steady thanks to the destruction of the clock and the locket's residual dampening power. He looked at Serafina and for the first time he saw only one version of her, the present, fixed reality. The endless, tragic echoes of her suffering past were gone. You're free, Kale confirmed, the words heavy with consequence. But Serafina's expression was grim. The curse is broken, but the venom is destabilized. She looked at her hand and Kale saw a faint, crystalline shimmer of gold, the same energy that pulsed around his own eyes, flicker in her veins. The clock wasn't just my prison, Kale. It was the stabilizer for the Vikos line. Lucian used the clock's steady temporal energy to keep our ancient, chaotic vampiric blood from collapsing. Now that it's shattered, the blood in my veins is reacting to the purest, most chaotic time energy it can find. She looked at Kale, the realization dawning in her eyes. It's reacting to you. The Vikos blood is trying to incorporate your temporal power. I am becoming something else. Kale touched her hand. The coldness was still there, but now mixed with a faint, electrical hum of energy. Their destinies were now physically intertwined. What about the Watchers and Marcus? Kale asked, standing up and cautiously looking back towards the collapsed vault entrance. The Archwatcher, Serafina replied, a predatory edge returning to her voice. His power was tied to the clock's dictation function. He is severely weakened, perhaps shattered. But Watchers are essences, Kale, not flesh. He will return. As for Marcus, Serafina's gaze dropped, a flicker of genuine sorrow in her burgundy eyes. Marcus was standing too close to the heart of the temporal overload. The clock's final blast was a pure, unconstrained time rip. Kale looked back at the wall, and now that his sight was clear, he focused on the residual energy. He saw a faint, fading shimmer where Marcus had stood, not of death but of erasure. He's not dead, Kale whispered, realizing the horrifying truth. He's been pruned. Removed from every possible timeline. Serafina nodded slowly. His sacrifice was pointless. He died trying to save me from the very freedom he feared. That is the price of shattering time. With the curse gone, the objective had shifted entirely. Serafina was free but unstable, and her Vikos blood was demanding Kale's temporal energy. We have to leave Alexandria immediately, Serafina commanded, the queen reasserting her role. The Watchers will be hunting for the fragments of the clock. Each fragment holds enough temporal energy to create a small, localized time anomaly. If they rebuild it or if they use the fragments to create a new prison, all of our sacrifice was for nothing. She reached out and pulled Kale close, her burgundy eyes burning into his. The Archwatcher wanted to stabilize my curse. The clock's destruction has bonded us. Now, our new mission is this. We must find every fragment of the Ethereum clock before the Watchers do. We must contain this chaotic power. And we must find a way to stabilize the temporal chaos that now flows through both of our bloodstreams. She looked at him, the desperate hunger from their first meeting replaced by an urgent, mutual need. Your power broke the chains, Kale. Now your power must build a new reality for us both. They climbed out of the ruins, leaving behind the dust of Alexandria and the ghost of Marcus. Kale, the seer, was no longer merely Seraphina's tool. He was her codependent, bound by the volatile power that now defined their intertwined existence. The days following the destruction of the Ethereum clock were defined by a tense, fragile codependence. Seraphina and Kale had made their way out of Alexandria, utilizing Kale's clear temporal sight to hijack a small vessel and cross the Mediterranean. The freedom Seraphina gained came with a terrible cost. A deep, internal instability. The gold energy of Kale's temporal power now flowed faintly through her veins, forcing her ancient Vico's blood into chaotic disarray. Her burgundy eyes would often flicker back to a dangerous, uncontrolled ruby, and her strength would spike and plummet without warning. Kale too was changed. With the clock shattered, the temporal chaos was no longer external but internal. His power, though contained by the Chronomancer's locket, now resonated painfully whenever Seraphina's emotional state, her hunger, her fear, or her desire, spiked. Their bond was now a psychic feedback loop. They landed in a remote, forgotten fishing village in Greece. Kale was hunched over a map, the locket warm against his chest. I can sense it, Kale murmured, his eyes glowing faintly. The fragments didn't just scatter randomly. They are drawn to places of concentrated time and historical significance. The first one is close, buried under the ruins of a pre-Hellenic temple. Then we retrieve it quickly, Seraphina commanded, her voice cold. The Watchers will be tracking the same temporal signatures. As they reached the ancient, wind-swept ruins, Kale saw the temporal trail, a shimmering faint path of gold dust leading toward a crumbling altar. Lying half-buried in the soil was a piece of the Ethereum clock, a small, intricate bronze cog no bigger than a coin, but pulsing with raw, frantic time energy. The cog, Kale whispered, reaching for it. Wait. Seraphina lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. Don't touch it directly, Kale. The raw temporal energy will overload your system. You must use a vessel. Seraphina pulled a long, ornate bone container from the inner lining of her cloak. It was carved with ancient Vico symbols. This is a temporal isolator. It will contain the chaotic energy. And it will be our map. Kale carefully used the bone container to scoop up the bronze cog. The moment the cog was secured, the container began to emit a deep, rhythmic hum. It resonates, Seraphina explained, staring at the container. Each fragment will point us to the next, like a compass of chaos. Suddenly the air grew cold and a high-pitched, mechanical whine cut through the silence. Too late, Vicos. 3 Watchers materialized from the shadows, their gray cloaks blending with the twilight. They looked battered, their energy shields flickering, but their resolve was absolute. They had found the fragment too. Surrender the isolator, Seer, the leading Watcher commanded. You are merely delaying the inevitable pruning. Seraphina shoved Kale behind the altar. Go. Keep the fragment moving. I will handle them. She drew her jeweled dagger and engaged. But this time the fight was different. Seraphina's movements were erratic. One moment she was blindingly fast, a blur of silver and black. The next she would momentarily stutter in time, her Vico's instability causing her to freeze for a fraction of a second. This was the terrifying result of the clock's destruction. A Watcher seized the opening and slammed an energy bolt into Seraphina's shoulder. She cried out, not in pain but in sheer, primal fury. Kale saw the immediate psychic feedback. The pain in Seraphina's shoulder resonated directly in his head, a burning shock of temporal dislocation. The golden light in his eyes flared uncontrollably. He looked at the Watcher who had struck Seraphina, and his sight went beyond the present. He didn't see one Watcher but 3 distinct timelines where the Watcher died, by fire, by crushing stone, and by being ripped apart by time itself. Kale reached out, channeling his rage into the most devastating of the 3. He didn't speak. He simply focused the gold energy of his eyes and willed it to be so. The Watcher screamed, a guttural, terrifying sound as his physical form began to shimmer and dissolve. His armor rusted instantly, his cloak turned to dust, and he was gone, erased by the raw power of Kale's vengeful temporal command. The remaining 2 watchers froze, their mechanical voices silent with shock. Serafina, recovering from the blast, stared at Kale, her burgundy eyes wide with awe and a sudden, terrifying fear. "He used the obliteration command," Serafina whispered, looking at the spot where the watcher used to be. The raw, unconstrained power of the seer. The remaining watchers instantly disengaged, dissolving back into the temporal fabric. They hadn't expected Kale's power to be so precise and so vicious. Kale stood, shaking, the raw, violent power receding. He had just wiped a sentient being from all of time. The act felt both monstrous and profoundly necessary. Serafina slowly approached him, not as his queen but as his co-conspirator. She placed her cold hand on his burning cheek. "That was not a human power, Kale," she said softly. "That was the power of the Archseer. And when you are wounded, I am wounded. When you feel fury, I feel the chaos. We are bound, Kale. For better or for ruin." She pulled him close, her voice dropping to a near-silent promise. "Every fragment we collect will increase our shared instability. We must learn to control this resonance. You are my anchor now, Kale. The only thing that keeps the Vico's blood from collapsing. And I, the only one who can teach you the language of time." Kale held her tight, feeling the electrical hum of the temporal cog in the container, and the volatile, cold heart of the vampire against his own. The hunt had begun, and their dark bond was the only weapon they had. The temporal isolator led them north, deep into the forgotten medieval heart of Eastern Europe, towards a crumbling, snow-dusted monastery built on a cliff's edge, a location saturated with centuries of quiet, slow time. The isolation was deliberate. Serafina needed to manage the chaotic temporal energy that now pulsed through her. The first clock fragment had intensified her vampiric needs while simultaneously destabilizing her control. They took shelter in the monastery's dilapidated library, surrounded by moldering books that smelled of ancient paper and regret. Serafina was battling a ferocious hunger. Her burgundy eyes were strained, and the faint golden shimmer in her veins was now more pronounced. "It's getting worse," Serafina admitted, leaning against a cold stone pillar. "The fragment's energy is forcing the Vico's blood to accept your temporal power. It's making me stronger, Kale, but the hunger is becoming uncontrollable. It's too chaotic." Kale watched her, his senses heightened by the co-resonance. He felt the sharp, desperate edge of her need, not just for blood but for anchor, for focus. "I feel it too," Kale confessed, pacing. "When your control slips, my sight goes wild. I keep seeing possibilities of us, escaping, growing old. And then I see us tearing each other apart." "The obliteration command, that was raw power, Kale," Serafina reminded him, her voice low and careful. "But it cost you. It cost us. If you continue to use that destructive force, our combined instability will eventually rip our shared timeline apart. Then teach me control," Kale demanded, frustration boiling over. "Tell me what Lucien taught you to stabilize the Vico's line." Serafina pushed off the pillar and walked slowly toward him. "Lucien never taught me stability. He taught me suppression. He used the Ethereum clock to keep my true power dormant. But the key to your temporal sight is not suppression, Kale. It's focus." She stopped directly in front of him, so close that the cold of her body was a counterpoint to the heat radiating from his own. "When the hunger spikes, Kale, I need a focal point to stop the chaos. And now that focal point is you." Serafina's burgundy eyes flashed to a frightening, bright ruby. Her fangs dropped, glistening, and the chaotic golden energy in her veins intensified, causing Kale's golden eyes to widen in shock. He instantly felt the overwhelming resonance, a blinding flood of her predatory desire mixed with a desperate, self-loathing fear of losing control. He saw a terrifying, fast-moving future, Serafina losing control and draining him completely. "Kale, listen to me," Serafina hissed, her voice struggling against the rising tide of the bloodlust. "The chaos is coming. I need you to do something to anchor me or I will lose myself. I will hurt you." Kale closed his eyes, fighting the terrifying vision. He reached out, not to push her away but to pull her closer. He had to force a fixed point, a new, unchangeable reality that could anchor both of them. He cupped her face and forced her to look into his golden eyes. "You are not a slave to the chaos, Ilara," he insisted, his voice trembling but firm. "You are not the beast. You are the queen who chose freedom over eternal comfort. Choose me." He ignored the temporal warning screaming in his mind. He pulled her against him and kissed her, a fierce, desperate kiss that was part command, part surrender. In that instant of physical, intentional contact, Kale channeled his own stabilizing temporal energy into her. He didn't use the locket. He used the raw force of his will, forcing the chaotic Vico's blood to accept the new anchor. The energy that flowed between them wasn't just physical or romantic, it was a profound temporal realignment. Serafina gasped against his lips, the ruby color in her eyes flickering violently. The hunger, the chaotic temporal resonance, suddenly snapped, replaced by a profound, agonizing stillness. When they finally broke apart, Serafina was trembling. Her eyes were back to the deep, stable burgundy. She had won the fight for control, but only just. "You are reckless, seer," she breathed, her voice filled with a dangerous mix of relief and fury. "You risked everything." "I anchored you," Kale countered, his body shaking from the massive energy drain. "Now we have a new fixed point. Our connection is the stabilizer. You cannot fall to chaos as long as you choose to hold on to me." The temporal isolator in the corner began to hum violently, no longer with a soft rhythm, but with a fast, erratic pulse. "The resonance," Serafina whispered, instantly back in control. "The second fragment is near. The chaos has been forced into the isolator." Kale pointed to the far wall where the stone had been carefully masked. "I see it now. A powerful, ancient time signature. It's behind that mosaic." The second fragment was a silver gear, intricately carved, embedded deep within a mosaic of a forgotten saint. As Serafina pried it out and secured it in the isolator, the entire monastery began to vibrate. The Watchers were coming. But this time Kale and Serafina were prepared. They had found their weapon, their dangerous, necessary bond. They escaped the monastery moments before the Watchers breached the outer walls, utilizing a forgotten catacomb Kale spotted with his temporal sight. The temporal isolator, now holding two fragments, pulsed fiercely, driving them towards their next destination, a ruined castle in the high remote mountains of Romania. Serafina was focused yet deeply strained. The intimate connection forged during their last confrontation had stabilized her, but it had also amplified the psychic feedback. Kale could now feel her ancient memories flickering at the edges of his mind, fragments of her life as the human Elara. The ruined castle of Castel Vicos, Serafina's ancestral home. "The resonance is strongest here," Kale confirmed, standing on a wind-whipped parapet, his golden eyes scanning the desolate landscape. "But this is too obvious. The Watchers know your history." "This is not a trap, seer," Serafina corrected, her burgundy eyes distant. "This is a memorial." Lucien was meticulous. He wouldn't place a fragment randomly. He would hide it in a place that held both time and agony for me. Kale felt a sudden, sharp vision. A woman, Elara, crying, clutching a newborn baby inside this castle as Lucien watched with cold satisfaction. "There was a child," Kale whispered, the revelation cutting through him. "You had a child, Elara?" Serafina flinched, the admission etched in the raw pain in her face. "Before the bite. Before the curse. Lucien saw my happiness as a distraction to his plan. He didn't just curse me, he took my mortality, my power, and the life of my son." She pointed to the crumbling stone of a high, collapsed nursery tower. "The fragment will be there. A constant reminder of the life he stole." As they moved toward the nursery tower, a chilling voice echoed through the ancient stone halls. It was distorted, but stronger than before. "The Vicos family history is a fascinating study in tragedy, Elara." The Archwatcher materialized, fully reconstructed, his silver armor pristine. But this time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by 6 Watchers, all operating with synchronized, terrifying precision. "We no longer seek your death, seer," the Archwatcher stated, his focus cold and absolute. "We seek your power. We saw the obliteration command. It is too volatile to exist unsupervised. You will come with us and be contained." Serafina immediately stepped in front of Kale, her dagger ready. "You will not touch him. His power is the only thing that frees me." "But it is your history that binds him," the Archwatcher countered, his hand crackling with blue-white temporal energy. "I know the nature of the curse, Elara. The curse was tied to the moment of your greatest failure, the moment you chose love over power. I can use that exact same temporal moment to sever your bond with the seer and bind him to the Watcher's command." He raised his hand, and the 6 Watchers created a blinding temporal energy circle around them. "You love this mortal, Elara," the Archwatcher mocked. "It is the predictable failing of your Vicos heart. But your love is his death." He fired a pulse of energy not at Kale, but directly at the temporal isolator Serafina held. The bone container screamed as the chaotic force hit it. Kale felt the immediate psychic backlash, a searing, splitting headache followed by a violent vision. He saw the timeline where he and Serafina succeed. They stabilized the fragments and live centuries together, but then he saw the Archwatcher reaching back through time and erasing Kale's birth. The ultimate pruning. A threat so complete, it erased their entire shared destiny. He can erase my existence from the past. Kale shouted, clutching his head. Not just me but the possibility of me. Yes, the Archwatcher confirmed with cold pride. We don't need to defeat you today, Seer. We only need to disrupt your anchor. Once Alara is forced to choose between the clock fragments and your life, her chaos will return, and your bond will be broken. Seraphina knew the threat was real. Her eyes fixed on Kale, then on the nursery tower. The conflict was tearing her apart. The desperate need for the fragment, her stability, versus the need to protect Kale, her anchor. Kale, the nursery tower. Seraphina yelled. Go. I will buy you time. She launched herself at the Watchers, unleashing a terrifying display of raw, unstabilized power. Her movements were a chaotic mixture of ancient vampiric might and the raw temporal energy pulsing through her veins. She was fast but reckless. Kale didn't hesitate. He knew the Archwatcher was baiting her. He sprinted toward the tower, ignoring the screaming of the psychic feedback, ignoring the painful gold light in his eyes. He reached the nursery and found a small iron chest embedded in the wall. As he touched it, the third fragment, a ruby-red crystal shard, pulsed fiercely within. But just as he grabbed it, a powerful chronal bolt slammed into his back. The attack wasn't from a Watcher, but from the Archwatcher himself, who had bypassed Seraphina and followed Kale. Kale stumbled, clutching the fragment and the locket, falling backward out of the broken window, 500 feet above the jagged mountain ravine. His life flashed before his eyes, not just his own, but every single alternate timeline where he had died. The world became a terrifying rush of wind and ancient stone. Kale was plummeting, the cold air tearing at his face, the jagged rocks of the ravine rushing up to meet him. He was clutching the Chronomancer's locket and the newly acquired ruby shard, the third Ethereum fragment. His rational mind was screaming, but his seer power, amplified by the ruby shard's chaotic energy, was showing him a million ways to die. He would hit the jagged ledge in 3.5 seconds. Kale had no time for filtering. He needed a temporal fracture massive enough to stop the fall, but controlled enough not to erase himself. He focused on the single, terrifying moment, the point of impact. Instead of letting the vision wash over him, Kale channeled his raw, vengeful fury at the Archwatcher. He poured the entire energy of his being, his terror, his love for Seraphina, his rage at being hunted, into the obliteration command. But he didn't aim the power outwards. He aimed it at the single timeline where he ceased to exist. No. Kale roared, his golden eyes blazing like supernova flares. In that instant, time did not slow down or speed up. It simply tore. Kale didn't land. He momentarily erased the present moment around his body, creating a microvortex of null time. He fell through the absence of time and landed hard, but not fatally, on a steep scree slope 50 feet lower. He rolled, his body bruised and battered but alive. The ruby shard was still tightly gripped in his hand. Above him, Seraphina's primal scream of horror and fury echoed through the mountains. She had witnessed Kale's fall and his impossible survival. The psychic feedback Kale felt was devastating. A raw, uncontrolled wave of grief, relief, and pure, concentrated power. Seraphina was no longer fighting the Watchers. She was unleashing her newfound, chaotic temporal Vicos energy. She flew down the tower wall, ignoring the Watchers' chronal bolts. Her eyes were not burgundy or ruby, they were a molten, screaming gold matching Kale's own. She landed, her entire being a radiating shield of volatile energy, her sheer force driving the Watchers back. You will not touch him again. Seraphina's voice was layered with an ancient, terrifying growl. The Archwatcher, infuriated by Kale's survival, launched a massive, concentrated blast of temporal energy at Kale. Die, anomaly. But Seraphina intercepted the blast. She didn't block it, she consumed it. The temporal energy surged into her, momentarily intensifying the gold in her eyes and making her skin glow. My anchor. Seraphina roared, her voice shaking the stone. You will not harm my anchor. She unleashed the absorbed energy back at the Archwatcher, not as a bolt, but as a silent, powerful temporal dislocation field. The Archwatcher was thrown backward, his pristine armor warping and buckling. He screamed, his voice dissolving into a high-pitched, echoing whine. Retreat. The bond is too strong. The Vicos is unstable. The Archwatcher commanded his remaining forces. The Watchers instantly vanished, melting back into the time stream, leaving Seraphina and Kale alone amidst the smoke and ruins. Seraphina stumbled toward Kale, collapsing to her knees beside him. The gold light in her eyes slowly receded, leaving behind a terrifying absolute exhaustion. She was breathing heavily, clutching her chest. I saw your death, Kale, she gasped, her voice raw. I saw the Archwatcher erasing you. And I let go of everything. I used the raw, unstable Vico's power. Kale, battered but functional, secured the ruby shard in the temporal isolator. The container now hummed with 3 distinct, chaotic frequencies. Your eyes, they were gold, Kale observed, touching her face. You absorbed his energy. The moment you created that null-time void to survive, Serafina explained, tracing the faint, painful bruise on his temple. You cemented our bond. My blood absorbed the chaos and channeled it through your temporal frequency. I'm no longer just a vampire, Kale. I am a temporal conduit. I can absorb and channel the raw energy of time itself, but only if your power directs it. She was no longer his queen. She was his codependent, a conduit for the same chaos that defined him. Serafina looked at the castle, then at the ravine, her face grim. This chaos will kill us both if we don't stabilize the flow. We need to find the remaining fragments. We need to find the one place where time is slow, constant, and can offer a place of final stabilization. Kale looked at the pulsating temporal isolator. He focused on the energy signatures of the 3 fragments, his golden eyes steady. He saw the path, clear and undeniable. The fragments are drawn to the most sacred, slow-moving repository of time, Kale stated, the vision solidifying. A place older than the library, immune to the Watcher's influence. Where's Seer? Serafina urged. The Silent City, Kale answered, feeling the ancient pull of the destination. We are going to the hidden vaults beneath the temples of Jerusalem. The destination felt less like a city and more like a massive, collective memory. Jerusalem, the Silent City, was a nexus of deep, slow, constant time, built layer upon layer by centuries of prayer and history. For the temporally bound duo, it was both a sanctuary and a blinding beacon for the Watchers. Kale and Serafina moved through the narrow alleyways under the cover of perpetual twilight, Serafina cloaked to shield her from the weak sun, Kale relying on the chronomancer's locket to dampen the chaos in his mind. The fragments are drawn to places where time moves slowly, Serafina explained, guiding them toward the ancient walls. The Watchers are masters of accelerating or reversing time, but they hate slow, steady time. It dulls their chronal senses. The temporal isolator, now holding 3 chaotic fragments, led them deep beneath the city's surface, into a maze of millennia-old cisterns and vaults, older than any recorded civilization. Kale focused on the isolator, letting its pulse guide his sight. The gold light in his eyes stabilized and he saw the next fragment, a small dark object pulsing with an unnerving black light. He saw the location, a hidden vault beneath the oldest temple foundation, surrounded by layers of protective, slow-moving temporal energy. But he also saw something else. Kale gasped, clutching Serafina's arm. What is it, Seer? Serafina demanded, instantly alert. The vault is protected by a guardian, Kale whispered, the vision intense. Not a Watcher. An older entity. A being made of slow time itself. It's called the Anchorite. It has guarded this place for 10,000 years. And it feeds on temporal disruption. Temporal disruption. Serafina's burgundy eyes narrowed in thought. Our chaotic bond. Our combined energy will draw it out like a moth to a flame. The 4th fragment, Kale continued, pointing down a dark, steep staircase. It's directly below us. But the Anchorite is waiting. And the Watchers are closing in. I can see their ripple. They're fighting the slow time, but they're coming. They reached a heavy, iron-bound door. Kale placed his hand on the metal, and the chaotic energy from the isolator pulsed violently. He could feel the proximity of the fragment, but also the ancient, hungry presence of the Anchorite. We cannot fight a creature of pure, slow time with chaos, Serafina stated, placing her hand over his. We must fight it with focus. Kale, we must stabilize the chaos. She looked deep into his golden eyes, her vulnerability replaced by fierce determination. Our bond is the only thing fast enough to strike and focused enough to survive. We need to channel our combined power, Kale. We need to perform a temporal synchronization. How? Kale asked, his breath ragged. It is the ultimate risk, Serafina warned, her voice barely a whisper. You must open your mind completely, Kale. Let the chaos in, let the Vico's blood accept the full temporal frequency. And I must channel my entire being, my blood, my centuries of power, into your anchor. For a brief moment, Kale, we must become one timeline. She kissed him, not with passion or hunger, but with fierce, terrifying intention. It was a conscious act of temporal fusion. The contact ignited a firestorm. The isolator screamed. Kale felt his consciousness merge with Serafina's. He saw her memories as clearly as his own. The pain of Lucien's betrayal, the coldness of 500 years, and the brief, bright memory of their shared moments of defiance. In that instant, Seraphina absorbed the full, chaotic flow of Kale's temporal sight, stabilizing it through the sheer will of her ancient life force. When they pulled apart, they were both shaking, utterly drained but profoundly connected. The light in Kale's eyes was no longer chaotic. It was a pure, stable golden orb. The light in Seraphina's eyes was a deep, stable burgundy, with no flicker of ruby chaos. They had achieved temporal synchronization. The power, Kale whispered, awe and terror mixing. I can see the single true path. Seraphina smiled, a tired but genuine smile. Now we face the creature of slow time. They used their synchronized power to force open the iron door. Inside, the chamber was vast and silent. At the center, suspended in the air, was the fourth fragment, a tiny, obsidian temporal gear pulsing with black light. But standing between them and the fragment was the anchorite. It wasn't human, it was a swirling vortex of dust and faded light, radiating a terrifying gravity. Time itself seemed to slow to a near stop around it. Temporal chaos. The anchorite's voice was a dry, slow whisper that took 5 seconds to form a single word. Disruptors. Die. Slowly. Seraphina moved first, but the anchorite's field was too strong. Her charge slowed to an agonizing crawl, every second feeling like a minute. Kale knew what to do. He channeled the full, synchronized power of their bond, aiming not for destruction, but for acceleration. Time. Forward. Kale commanded, his voice ringing with synchronized power. A blinding, focused beam of pure, accelerated time energy shot from his hands, striking the anchorite. The creature of slow time screamed, a sound that spanned decades but was heard in a single instant. The temporal acceleration forced its ancient, slow form to rush forward, destabilizing its cohesion. Seraphina, now freed from the slow time field, moved with blinding, vicose speed, snatching the obsidian gear and securing it in the isolator. The anchorite, its form shredded by the accelerated time, vanished into dust. But the fight wasn't over. As the dust settled, the iron door behind them burst open, revealing the returning Archwatcher and his remaining forces. The synchronization will not save you, Vicos, the Archwatcher roared, looking at Kale's stable gold eyes and Seraphina's stable burgundy eyes with a mixture of rage and fear. You may be synchronized, but you are not immune.